Hello and welcome to Political Thinking, a conversation with, rather than a news interrogation of, someone who shapes our political thinking about what has shaped theirs. My guest this week is an MP whose heroes have included Tony Benn, Arthur Scargill and Boris Johnson. He's a man who, depending on your point of view, tells it like it really is, or relishes insulting those unable to fight back. Whether it's telling people who are struggling to make ends meet that they should learn to shop cheaply and cook for themselves, nurses that have got no need to use a food bank, or refugee charities that they're just as bad as people smugglers. He is Lee Anderson, former NUM member, minor Labour councillor, now proud MP for his hometown of Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, and deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. It's been quite a journey. Lee Anderson, welcome to Political Thinking. You have not created a controversy for a few weeks now. Have you been neutered? Have they caged you in this new job?
Well, no. 2 weeks ago when I got the job, I was on a Home Affairs Select Committee visit to Uruguay on the legalisation of drugs, and then I think the week after we was on recess. So this is my first full week back. Not been any controversies, I don't think, this week, but I keep looking at my phone for updates to see what I've said, see who I've upset. But
joking apart, though, do you relish the controversies? Do you plan them, or do you just, as I said in the introduction, say what you think?
Nothing is planned, Nick. I mean, what I say is not controversial. I don't think it is. It may be controversial to the BBC. It may be controversial to the mainstream media. It may be controversial to people in Parliament. I mean, I'm saying what I believe most people in my constituency think. And when I get home on a Thursday, people will come out to me as I walk up home from the train station and say, Lee, you're saying what we're thinking. Keep doing it.
No, the reason I joke that you were being caged or neutered is you founded something, you chaired the Blue Collar Conservatives. It's all about demanding, as I understand it, tax cuts, about demanding control of immigration for voters like the ones you represent in what we now call the Red Wall. But you're backing a man who doesn't believe, as far as we can tell, in those two things. Certainly hasn't delivered them yet. So that's why I suggested to you maybe you've been caged or neutered.
No, absolutely not. I left the Blue Collar as chair, obviously, because I've got this new role within the party. That's a great privilege. Look, Rishi is a low tax. He was a low tax politician. He's told me that to his face, but he's inherited a rum deal. We've gone through 2 years of COVID, a war in Ukraine, got lots of debt, over £500 billion spent on for taxpayers' money. We've got to balance the books, and I'm pretty sure, and I'm confident for next year. I think Rishi's just proved with the Northern Ireland issue.
So for those people, and there were, you'll know, plenty of Tories,
yes,
who actually said he's a socialist, Rishi Sunak. I've interviewed Tories who say that. And you were a Boris Johnson backer, you were a Liz Truss backer. You now think it's not that you've been neutered, it's that those people got Rishi Sunak wrong.
No, I think there's that much talent within the I nearly said Labour Party then, within the Conservative Party that we've got some really good people.
Old
that can run
habits,
the country.
Lee.
Old habits
die hard.
Yeah, well, that's true. Look, Rishi is a smart man.
Okay,
he's a smart man.
Let's talk more about politics in a second.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about where those old habits came from, why you were a Labour man and went on to be a Tory. Now, you talk about being a proud Ashfield man.
Yes.
Born, brought up, all your family there. For people who don't know it, what do you mean by that? What sort of place is it? What are you proud of?
Ashfield is a coal mining constituency. It's built on coal and textiles.
And your dad was a miner?
Yes, all my family were coal miners, all the male members, should I say. Weren't many females worked down the pit, well, there weren't any. But I followed my dad into the pits when I left school, and I was incredibly proud to do that job.
And your dad? Traditional, working class, hard-working, I imagine, demanding?
Labour man, through and through, trade unionist, been on strike 72, 74 and 84. He's got the badge. He did all that because he thought it was right what he was doing to protect his job, to protect his community. And then, 40-odd years later, he finds himself voting for me at a general election.
So, in your house then, I don't imagine there was a lot of debate about politics. Presumably politics meant Labour and the union.
It did. I mean, growing up in the 70s, and I tell this story very, very often, it was Scargill, Skinner, Tony Benn. That was our political diet. That's what we listened to on the wireless. That's what we watched on the TV if they ever came on. And just a few miles away, Chesterfield Town Hall, sometimes on a Friday night, I would go and watch Tony Benn speak. I can remember going to one event, I think it was Tony Benn, Scargill, and Skinner, all on the same bill. As a 16-year-old, listening to those three people speak, you come out of that building feeling 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they said; it's just the delivery. They was absolutely superb.
Well, it must have mattered what they said to a certain extent.
Yeah.
What was it that appealed then? Was it a sense that they were fighting for your class?
Yeah.
Was it the community? Was it just at that stage, a visceral dislike of the Tories?
Well, there was the contract, I think. They were pretending they were fighting for our class, I think. That's what they're trying to do.
But what did you believe at the time?
Well, I believed it. I believed it because in a coalfield community, in a constituency where most men work down the pit, we saw the nasty Tories as taking away our pits and our livelihood. And you go to these rallies and these speeches, and you've got real important people who you think they're important, like your Skins, your Scargills, and your Tony Benn, and they're telling us the same message. And the people we've got to blame is the nasty Tories. So you come out here, you're a Tory hater, you hate Maggie, and you want to start the revolution.
And did you hate Maggie?
Yeah, with a passion. Our community.
I mean, if I'd been in your house, you would have said some potentially unrepeatable
things.
Yes,
we did. We was conditioned to. It's a coal mining community. Things are being taken away from you. Who do you blame? You blame the nasty Tories, and Maggie was leading the Tories, and that just follows. That was most households.
Has it taken you a long time to forgive the Tories? Because you have been critical, still being critical of what you think Margaret Thatcher did.
Yeah, I mean, I forgive her, and I look back now, and I will repeat the story every week. This country needed Margaret Thatcher in the 70s and 80s. The country was being held to ransom. The unions were running amok. Yeah, we thought it was unfair because we suffered, we got the blunt of it, but you cannot have a situation where the trade unions are going on strike every 5 minutes, holding the country to ransom and making everybody miserable, and that's what was happening.
Sure, but I want to remind people you didn't convert to the Tories until 2018.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't that you thought this in the Blair period, you didn't think in the Brown period, you didn't think in the Ed Miliband period.
Yeah.
You're working for a Labour MP.
I was,
against people who tried to become the Tory Prime Minister.
And that's when the penny dropped, when I started working for Labour MP.
Well, let's talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
First of all, though, what else about Ashfield? Your dad was a miner, Paul. Your mum, Jennifer, was a factory worker.
Yes.
2 wages, and yet you describe, when you talk about this, a very poor house. How come?
Well, I think that was typical of households in Ashfield at the time. The men worked down the pit. Some did 7 days a week. My mother worked at the factory. And things were more expensive, I think, back in the 70s. Food was definitely more expensive, relatively speaking. People were paying a lot more as a percentage of their wages on food then. That's just how it was. But there was also a culture of, a lot of the miners went out for a drink as well. They liked the odd pint. We had one holiday a year, which was a caravan in Skegness. Like I said, we had a garden full of vegetables, chickens at the bottom of the garden for the eggs, and that was our food bank. Our garden was our food bank. So if it was short or anything, my dad went in the garden or the allotment and got the food out. So, I mean, we didn't think we was in poverty. I didn't think we were impoverished or in poverty or dirt poor. I didn't think that. Perhaps if some people today could go back in a time machine and see how we lived, they'd probably think we were very, very poor. But I didn't see that at the time.
Is there a bit of you that is nostalgic for that?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I look at my dad getting up in the morning to go to work at 4:30 to a coal mine. Remember every morning his alarm clock going off. That woke me up. And that sort of conditioned me to thinking that, when I leave school, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be having my own alarm clock. But just a few years later, I was getting up with my dad and going to the pit and, going to work together and doing a shift underground.
Now, what's interesting is you then leave the mines because your relationship breaks up and you've got 2 boys to bring up. You've got Charlie and Harry to bring up, and you bring them up as a single parent. And again, these are tough times. Yeah,
it's difficult when you go from going to work and providing for a family to all of a sudden finding out you're on your own, looking after children. I got great support from my family, obviously. I spent a little bit of time out of work, but I was volunteering at the same time at a local charity,
Citizens
Advice Bureau, which was very good to me. I learned some new skills. It kept me in the workplace. It kept my brain ticking over, and eventually, I got a job with Citizens Advice Bureau, and I did that for several years. And that sort of I drifted then into politics, and that's where I met Gloria when I was working at the CAB.
Gloria De Piero was the Labour MP for Ashfield, now a telly presenter, and who you work for. What's interesting, though, when I read your background, Background in poverty. You then experience poverty as you're bringing up your children as a single
But I'm
parent.
not saying it's poverty. I didn't think it was poverty.
Okay.
Yeah.
But people who don't know you think, isn't this the guy who's very unsympathetic to people who are struggling to make ends meet now? Doesn't he remember how it was? Doesn't he empathise? Doesn't he remember the people he used to help in Citizens Advice? And
Yes.
you worked in a hostel for the homeless as well, didn't
Yes,
you?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, went to several hostels for the homeless people as well. Yeah.
So what's happened?
I'll tell you what it was, Nick. When I first started working at CAB, we were seeing families that were coming in with all sorts of social problems. It was debt, it was housing problems, it was relationship problems, it was benefit problems, and we used to help these people. And this is 20 years ago, I think it probably is. And I would see these families and we'd patch them up and move them on and think, I've done a really good job there. And then fast forward 10 years, when I'm working for a Labour MP, I'm seeing the sons and daughters of these same families who's got the same issues. And I think to myself, my goodness, we've not solved anything here. All we've done is allowed a new generation of young people to come along and have the same problems that the mum and dad had. And that got me thinking that we was wrong in our approach, totally wrong.
That's interesting. So the experience of working with people who are struggling, you might not like this word, but hardened you.
Yeah.
I mean, made you think,
Yeah, it did, yeah.
hold on, we're getting this wrong.
Yeah. I went from, come on in, let's sort you out, blah, 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 we need to help you, to thinking, my goodness, in 10 years later, I was seeing the children of these families and thinking, we've not actually helped you. We've made it worse for you.
But you see, when you say, as you did, no nurse needs to use a food bank.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I said nobody on 35 grand needs to use a food bank. Slightly different.
But you were talking about nurses.
Oh, any public sector worker on 35 grand should not be using a food bank. And I did challenge a reporter to provide any public sector worker in Ashfield to come and see me who used the food bank. I'm still waiting.
There may be a reason for that.
Why?
Well,
I know the reason. It doesn't exist.
No, sure. But that may be because Ashfield,
Yeah.
I hesitate to say this to a proud Ashfield man, Ashfield isn't the world. In other words, there may be
It's my
people...
world, though, Nick.
Sure, but there may be people in other parts of the world who do struggle on a salary which would make you relatively rich in Ashfield. Let's just take off the top of my head an example like Barking in Essex or Dagenham. To buy a house in your constituency, we checked this out before going on air, on average is 214,000. To buy a house in Barking and Dagenham is 403,000. I suspect, I haven't got the figures, rent's a lot higher.
Yeah.
So is it a bit glib to say, because I don't know a nurse who needs to use a food bank? There aren't any nurses who need to use a food bank.
Well, where are they?
Well,
Have you got any?
Well, I've got them here, but the Royal College of Nursing can provide you with
Yeah, well,
them.
they will do.
United the
Yeah,
Union can.
yeah, yeah.
Unison can.
Yeah, but
I can get them
the
on air.
unions have all got an agenda, you know that. They will provide these
Doesn't
case
mean the
studies.
people don't exist.
Well, it doesn't.
You've got
but
an agenda, they've got an agenda.
My
doesn't mean-
inbox is full of when I make these comments, these so-called controversial comments, which, by the way, are not controversial. My inbox floods from people, not just from Ashfield, from places like Barking, from all over the UK, saying, you know what, Lee, thank goodness somebody's speaking out. We actually agree with you. I get pensioners contacting me from southern constituencies who's on peanuts. They're on less than 20 grand a year. They're not using food banks.
Nobody's saying that everybody on that salary has to use a food bank. What I'm asking is, do you have empathy, do you have sympathy with some who find themselves over a food bank? They might have other problems.
Of course
in
they
their
do.
life,
And
don't
I've
they?
always said, when I was working at CAB, we used to refer people to food banks. So at the time, the Labour government was in. We weren't allowed to broadcast the fact, by the way. But look, if somebody's suffered domestic abuse, lost their job, become ill, suddenly got a disability, had a major trauma in their life, I think the state should be there to wrap their arms around them and help them in a difficult time. It should not be a way of life. I was brought up differently. And I'm a product of where I was born and I was brought up.
Just before we move on, because of what you saw as a volunteer and then working for a Labour MP, doing no doubt lots of casework with people with problems in the constituency, you're very critical of the benefit system now, universal credit.
Yeah.
Do you think it keeps people poor?
Yeah, it keeps generation after generation poor, and it stifles aspiration, and it ruins children's outcomes, educational outcomes, expectations. Look, I saw a family when I was working for Gloria. It was a man and a woman. They never worked. They had 5 children. I think 3 of the children was on disability living allowance for ADHD, behavioural problems. They was getting £53,000 a year net. Now, to get that sort of wage, you've got to be earning over 70k. We know that. But the worst thing for me with that was not the actual amount of money they was getting. It was their children were labelled as disabled. So when they left school, they're going to be having the same problems as the parents. And we're not breaking the poverty cycle. It's cruel because we're ruining people's lives.
But are you telling your party?
Yes, of course I am. Yeah, of course I am.
So
And they're
change
listening.
it.
And they are listening to me.
You worried me then because you became all diplomatic and gave me a party line,
I'm
and I
not-
thought the whole point of Lee
No,
Anderson is you don't give me a party line.
No, I've spoken to the party many, many times.
Okay.
But now I've got a bit more of a voice.
Now, you started to say, and I interrupted you, that you left the Labour Party because of what you saw when you were working for the
Yes.
party, working for the local Labour MP, Gloria De Piero.
I was in a Labour group meeting in February 2018, I think it was, when one of the Momentum members said to me, "Have you ever read the works of Karl Marx?" And I said, "No, I've not." He said, "Well, why don't you off then and join the Tory party?"
Yeah.
So I said, "You know what, mate, that's not a bad idea." So I did. And then within 18 months, I was his MP. So the Labour Party give great career advice.
Before you got given a job by Rishi Sunak, when it comes to the issue of the small boats crossings with migrants, you said it's like the band on the Titanic playing the same tune and ignoring the obvious. What was like the small band on the Titanic?
Well, I just felt the whole of Parliament was like that. Not just my own party. I thought the whole of Parliament was just, not taking it as seriously as it is. It comes up all the time on the doorstep. Our inboxes are full of it. We've now got, leafy suburbs where the hotels are full of illegal migrants. I went to Calais the other week and witnessed firsthand the nonsense that's going off there. It scares me. It frightens me.
When you said, though, ignoring the obvious, what did you mean?
Yeah, well, the obvious is a big problem. That's the obvious. It's going to create big social problems in this country. We've got undocumented tens of thousands of young men coming in from all over the world. We don't know who they are, where they've been. Some of them are just blatantly lying when they go through the process.
There are protests now outside the asylum hotels you described, which are sometimes in leafy suburbs. They're quite often actually in the poorest parts of the country, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you have some sympathy with the protesters?
Of course I do. Yeah, I mean, when I hear that protesters are protesting, and these aren't far-right extremists, they're just normal family people from some of these towns and villages that are upset that, overnight 200 or 300 young men have arrived and they're saying things to young girls, and I know there's been a few attacks and some horrible incidents. So, of course, people are going to be concerned. That's just human nature. At the end of the day, when you live in a community, you expect to be safe, and you don't like sudden change. That's how humans behave.
What's frightening about having a hostel or a hotel full of young asylum seekers who, frankly, just want a better life?
Well,
in the way my grandparents wanted a better life when they fled the Nazis.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. They've come here for a better life. They're not asylum seekers. They're abusing the asylum system. We know that. I mean, I spoke to the young men in the camp in Calais. None of them were fleeing violence or persecution. They were coming to the UK, and the words they kept saying was El Dorado, El Dorado. And all they're doing at this Care for Calais camp, they're walking them through the asylum process. They meet them when they get to the hotels in the UK, walk them through the asylum process again. They're being coached, and they're abusing the system.
But you've sort of made a generalisation again. Now, there may be people who would agree with you about Albanians, for example, who you made the point in the past. Yeah, Syrians, Iranians, Afghans, Somalis are people coming from war-torn countries. You say they're not really.
But there's lots of people staying in those war-torn countries, Nick, isn't there? What people don't like, it's the optics of tens of thousands of young men. We're not seeing very often it's women and children and vulnerable people. And that if we saw that, then maybe people, the general public, and especially in places like Ashfield, they'd be more sympathetic.
But they have to have a way of getting it then, don't they, Mr. Anderson? How would they get
Well,
here?
there are schemes, you know that, Nick. There are schemes available for people to come here legally. But the thing is...
There are not schemes for lots of countries.
But why are young men coming to this country and leaving their women and children behind? That's not the sort of young men that, that's going to have sympathy in this country.
Because they're earning money and they're sending it to their families, and they hope their families
in
will follow them.
1941, when the Nazis were poised, my granddad left a coal mine in Nottinghamshire. And he went to fight the Nazis. He didn't get on a boat and escape to America and then send for his family. He could put a uniform on, got a gun, and went to fight for this great country of ours. And that's what is in the hearts and minds of a lot of my constituents.
When my grandparents were in Nazi Germany, they fled to Italy. And according to your advice, they should have stayed in the first country they went to.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Because, there were death camps all across Eastern Europe. There were people being murdered and executed. That's completely different.
Just before we move on, you know you've got a bit of criticism for mixing with people who have extreme views.
Yeah.
The so-called Skegby Scooter Club.
Yeah.
People you praised as top lads who make me proud of Ashford. Do you understand why, when people have looked into the political views of those people, that they find them completely unacceptable?
Well, yeah. Listen, I mean, the Skegby Scooter Club, it's got about 200 members, I think it has, and male and female. They do lots of charity work throughout the community. They have nights, they have charity nights. They're always booked up. And, you know, for me to be photographed with a couple of people who might have had far-right leanings many, many years ago at a charity do, where they'd raised a lot of money for local good causes. I mean, they didn't show all the other photos that I'd taken that night with other people.
Yeah, but there were shirts saying "No Remorse, White Pride."
No, there wasn't.
Fluke Dudley.
No, there wasn't.
And he has an Odin's cross, a white power symbol tattoos on his leg.
Let me stop you there. There was nobody wearing that T-shirt at the event I was at.
Do you not think you should check out people you mix with?
Well, everybody, hundreds. I have hundreds of photos taken every week. Do you think I should check everybody that I have a photo taken with?
So now you wouldn't meet those people?
Oh, they're part of a scooter club. They're part of a scooter club. They've actually publicly announced what they did 25 years ago. The Fluke Dudley one, he said it's something they did 25 years ago. He's not part of it anymore.
Crudely, the question is whether you condemn the people who behave that way.
Well, you know, it's like when you become an MP and you get a bit of a profile, lots of people want photos with you. It's as simple as that. I don't fill a form out and say, have you ever been a part of this group, that group? No, I just have a photo took in good faith.
Now, you once described, I think, Boris Johnson as a friend.
Yeah.
Said he'd do well in the Ashfield Working Men's Club in a way that Corbyn wouldn't.
Yeah.
Could he be Prime Minister again?
Ooh, that's a good question. I haven't been asked this a few times. I don't think age is on his side, to be honest with you. I think he's coming up to 60. I'd love him to have a go for London Mayor again. I think that would be interesting because I think he'd win in London. I think he'd beat Khan because we need to get rid of him. He's not been good for the city.
But there's nothing in his behaviour, because you were critical of him at the time. There's nothing in his behaviour that means, look, you know, he shouldn't be Prime Minister again on ethical grounds.
I don't think, and everybody's got a right to put the hat, chuck the hat in the ring at some stage. I don't think he will do. I think his day's gone. But he's still a big force in politics. Boris is a big character. People want to meet him. Regardless of what you think about him, he's a big draw, is Boris.
His day is gone, and Rishi Sunak, for the moment, is your man.
Yeah.
For those who, again, I'm sure, say to you, he's never going to do these things you believe in. You've been had, you've been captured. He's done what he wanted, which say, how do I shut Lee Anderson up? I know, I'll give him a big job. And then he'll be all diplomatic like he's been to Nick Robinson on the radio and the telly now. So why are they wrong?
The brief I got when I accepted the job was keep on saying what you're saying and keep on doing what you're doing. That's why we love you. That's why we're giving you the job.
So you're saying if he doesn't deal with the small boats, he's in trouble?
Well, what I will say to that, and this is not a politician's answer, I don't change my opinion on anything just because I've had a promotion. What I said 6 weeks ago, I stand by it. Anything, including small boats, including the economy.
So he's still on the Titanic fiddling?
We were all on the Titanic. Political parties, especially if you're in government, are all on the Titanic at some stage, aren't you? You know, we've got to get the course right, steady the ship, and deliver on our promises. If we do that, we'll be fine.
Now, you've described quite a journey. And I imagine at times a painful journey for anybody changing their politics because people don't like it. Your son in particular, Harry, wasn't massively impressed, was he, when you'd said you were going to be a Tory?
No. Harry, bless him, he went to university in Sheffield. He'd only been there 6 months and came back a different man. He'd got his beard and he was a vegetarian and obviously changed for the worse, I think, actually. First vegetarian ever in our family. And but he was a Labour Party member and idealistic, a nice young man.
And a Corbynite.
And a Corbynite, yeah. Believed in all that. And when I joined the Tory party, I think it's because it was in that circle of friends as well at university. Like a left-leaning socialist group of friends. When the news broke, because I think it broke on the BBC, he was very, very upset. When he rung me, he was deeply upset. But you know, we're still best of friends.
Upset sadly, or upset angry?
He was sad that I'd left the Labour Party. He'd probably a little bit angry with me as well because I'm his dad. Probably angry that I didn't tell him because I didn't. Everything was such a whirlwind at the time. And I suppose he felt a little bit let down by me as well. But that's what happens in families. Sometimes you feel like you've let your your family, your loved ones down, and he hadn't. You know, I thought I did it for the right reasons, but now, you know, he's totally over it. And
So when he sees those headlines,
yeah,
does he call you up
Yeah.
or message you and say, "What have you said now?"
no, when he sees the other headlines, when people are attacking me, he'll ring and say, "Daddy, you okay?" So,
He looks after you.
Yeah, he looks after me. Yeah.
Lee Anderson, thank you very much for joining me on Political Thinking.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson is, if you like, the red wall made flesh. Bit of a cliche, that phrase, red wall, isn't it? Because it covers so many areas and so many people. But he knows what it means. It means speaking up for the people he thinks don't get a hearing. It means the Tories reaching parts of the country that they struggle to reach without him. The question is, having him on side, giving him a big job, is that enough? Or as he starts to sound more and more like another politician, and if Rishi Sunak fails to deliver the things he used to say were vital just a few weeks ago, will it be anything like enough? Thanks for watching.